Hello everyone, my name is Olli. I come from Ashore. Today's webinar is on the topic of HP ALM templates. I'm going to share some of the best practices that us here at Ashore have come by in creating and deploying templates. I'm going to give you some techniques and tips and tricks on how to get the best out of templates in HP ALM and Quality Center. So looks like we have a good bunch of people, about 50 people in the room at the moment, and with more coming in. So glad to see you all here. I know we've got people from several different lines of businesses here, from aviation to entertainment to finance and other sectors. So good to have you all here. All right, let's get started. So about this webinar, it'll be about 30 minutes with a Q&A. If you have any questions or if you have any technical concerns, please make sure to address those in the chat or in the questions pane. And as you exit the webinar, please fill in the survey form that opens. We'd really appreciate it. And you will receive a recording and the materials sometime after the session. So we are recording, and we'll be posting all this material for everybody who registered into the webinar. So about today's agenda, first I'm going to have a brief introduction to templates. Then I'm going to go through how to design templates, what's the process included there, what are the strategies of deploying templates in the organization, the top 3 challenges that we've come across while building templates and how to overcome them, and Q&A at the end. All right, so just a reminder, today we have these first of a series of webinars. We've got 2 more in this HP ALM series. The other one is called Complete Standardization, and the other one is called The Road to Unified Testing Processes, a Customer Story. I'll make sure you get the links to these. You can also find them at ashore.net/webinars. So be sure to sign up for these. There'll be very interesting content in these as well. So briefly about me, I've been in QA over 10 years, been with working with HP ALM Quality Center for I think 9 years now. So a bunch of experience with HP tools, and there's my details. If you want to give me a holler, ask me something, I'd be happy to help you out. About Ashore, we're a company that specializes in HP ALM. We are an international software and services company with offices worldwide, so we do provide products for HP ALM as well as services. We're an HP Gold business partner, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of you guys at HP Discover this year. So I know some of you will be coming there, so we'll see you guys there. So that's pretty much us. Look on our website, ashore.net, for what we do. So let's talk templates, and the majority of today's session will be spent on this. So what's the history of templates? What did this start with? Well, people tried it back in the days of Test Director and Quality Center 9.2 when it first got released. Back in the day, people realized that they need to have control over project customizations, and what they did, they just used regular projects as templates and started copying new projects from those. But what they really realized was that any changes were quite difficult to manage. Once things got outdated quite quickly, and pushing out a customization to multiple projects was quite challenging. So HP actually in Quality Center 10 Premier, which is now HP ALM, they introduced a new functionality to address this issue. It's called process. HP calls it process enablement, and it's really introduced the concept of real project templates. So a lot of the stuff today will be on the ALM, the process enablement, but there are also things here that apply to Quality Center users. So I'm sure that you'll find a lot of valuable content, even though you're not yet on the HP ALM edition at this time. So what is a project template in HP ALM? It's a special project with some special functionality. So it's a project where you define your customizations and you push those to the projects that are linked to that template. So you link projects and then you push customizations at the push of a button. You enforce those customizations onto projects that are linked to that template. So that's just to lay down the basic if you're not aware of the issue. Volume is going up and down, sometimes very low and sometimes going very high. Okay, I'll try to adjust my microphone. Give me just 1 second and I'll try to see if I can address that. Thanks for the heads up on that. All right, so that's pretty much what a project template is. So what can you enforce by using HP ALM templates? And this is really the core functionality of HP ALM. The fields, the lists and list items, user group definitions, requirement types, templates, workflow script, and risk-based quality management. Most importantly, of course, fields and lists and user groups being the really important parts that control the way people use Quality Center every day, but also other things that affect the Quality Center projects. So that's just if you're not aware of what parts are actually affected by the templates. And this is really it. And I'm going to focus on many of these areas today. So why should you enforce templates? So first of all, to support the needs of your business users. We all know that the vanilla Quality Center it's not enough for business users. They have different needs and customizations and different fields, different functionalities that they need to have within the tool. You have managers who want reporting and want certain fields to exist based on that. So really that's the way to go. You need to be able to have customization but have control over that customization. Having templates in place really improves customer communication and enables common testing practices. So what we've seen some really good results based on this. Companies that implement common testing practice in their center of excellence by using templates. I've heard of productivity going up 20% in one case. So that's quite a good number. You can take, once you have templates in place and you have your projects linked to them, you can take full benefit of all the cross-project and collaborative features within HP ALM. For example, sharing test assets across projects to reduce duplication and to, for example, share a bunch of requirements from a central repository to all the linked projects and so on. So that's a very useful feature in HP ALM, as well as the cross-project graphing that HP does provide when you have the ALM edition. I'm not going to go to what's in ALM. You can ask HP about that. You can check some of our old webinars. There's a whole bunch of other cool stuff in HP ALM besides these features as well. Analytics is another part. So once your organization matures to the state where management starts really looking at, how are we doing testing? How are we doing QA? How can we improve? How can we shift left? What you're going to need then is statistics for analytics. So having a template in place and capturing that data means that you have a base for data from your organization. You're already capturing that data, and then it's just a matter of implementing analytics on top of that. And that's something that will really help your organization improve. Reduce maintenance from changes and updates. So meaning that, for example, before templates, imagine pushing 10 fields to 10 projects. You'd have to log into each one of them and click, add that field to many projects. With the templates functionality in ALM, you can just easily push out updates to any project at the click of a button. You can link multiple projects to a template, and it really eases the maintenance. A lot of customers we've seen before they were managing 10 different versions of a template, 10 different workflow branches, but once they standardized on a couple of centralized templates, they will really saw a great reduction in the maintenance cost. And integrations is something that comes up nowadays quite a lot. HP ALM gets integrated to a variety of tools these days. Now, if your fields in the project are not aligned not aligned across projects, what you're going to have to do is once you implement an integration, you'll have to do that for each project separately. So integrations rely on fields, and if those fields are not consistent across the board, then for each of the projects that needs an integration, you'll have to tailor the integration separately for that project, and that can really add up to a maintenance headache. So that's just some of the reasons behind why to enforce templates. If you're still having problems with the voice quality, could you please let me know, and I'll try to see if I can fix that. Thanks. Now, what about templates in QC Enterprise if you're not using the ALM edition of Quality Center, the most comprehensive version? So if you're using Quality Center Enterprise, you can have a sort of template-like strategy. So just design and document your templates, create new projects from a template project. Now, what you'll miss out on is a lot of of course, the process enablement, the one-click administration and customizations, asset sharing, cross-project reporting, and a whole bunch of other stuff from HP ALM. And if you're doing this in QC Enterprise, you'll have to enforce quite strong policies for administration. I like to call it process police, where you have to make sure that projects stay aligned, projects don't make any sudden changes to the way they work. And that's a lot of manual overhead. So we do, see what the right way to go forward is to upgrade to ALM, and the customers we've seen do that. They've got a lot of great value from the HP ALM version, both from the administration as well as from some of the more business side features such as asset sharing and ALI. All right, so let's talk best practices. So how would we classify a superior template, a great template? First of all, it supports your business users. So it means that it supports them in their everyday work. It enables them to do their work better and faster. It's easy to understand and unambiguous. So it means that anything you have in your drop-downs, your fields, and your folders is quite easy to understand. You've thought it over, and the terminology that you use is quite clear. Of course, a lot of that you can avoid with documentation and having proper documentation in place. But bear in mind that then the users will most likely spend their time in the UI, so make sure that all your terminology is clear. Automated business processes. So that's really the key of templates. Automating key parts of the business of the testing process with workflow code. So when you're dealing with requirements, for example, making state transitions for requirements, filling in fields automatically there. If a requirement moves from a draft to approved, changing a couple of fields based on that. So it all really speeds up the way users use HP ALM. So make sure that you've automated those business processes with your template. So there's template workflow code. I'll mention that later. Make sure it incorporates your best practices from the field, so what works and what doesn't. I'll go into that later. Make sure it's documented and make sure it's future-proof. So I already mentioned the fact that as your organization matures, you might run into the situation where management wants information about, how are our applications comparing, or our teams or vendors. And if you then realize you don't have any of that data in place, that you didn't implement that into your template, then that can be a problematic situation. So when building the template, make sure it's future-proof and have some of those ideas in there as well. So let's go into some more detail. So how do we like to define and design and implement templates? So what's the process related to that? You can say it's about 5 phases are included. So first one is an assessment, where you look at what's going on today. Then there's a design and piloting phase, which pretty much goes hand to hand. That's a phase where you'll be doing a lot of iterating and piloting and back and forth. Then there's testing. I'm not going to go to that in any detail because I know you guys are QA professionals. Anything you develop, you need to test to make sure that it works, that there's no workflow bugs and so on. So that's that. And deployment and training. So it's really what you're doing in a template project is you're changing the way people work with the tool. So it's essential that you provide them with the necessary communication and training as well. I'm going to mention that at the end, some tips for how to manage that. But again, some of the biggest challenges that you'll probably run into is in this area. So how to design the proper template, how to pilot it, how to get customer buy-in, your user buy-in, to make sure that it fulfills the needs of the users. So let's talk about assessment, for example. So the first phase, how do you start with defining the template? Where if you're a new user, then if you just started using HP ALM, use a partner like us to when they start figuring out from scratch what you're going to need into the tool. The HP provides some of the demos and such, but that's really something that That's not such a great best practice. So involve a partner who knows what they're doing. If you're thinking, if you're already using Quality Designer and you're thinking about, let's start using templates, or let's improve the templates that we're currently using, then analyze what you currently do. Look at your projects. Look at which fields they're using or how they're working. Are they using the fields that you put into the current template? And I'm going to show a demo of that soon. So how that typically looks like. Interview those stakeholders. So it's really a key part of the whole template design project is to take your stakeholders in and make sure that you get their requirements and their opinions. So what works for them currently and what doesn't, what are they looking for in the future template. Look at your usage statistics. So again, look at how the projects are currently leveraging the fields. And go to your wish list. Pretty much every admin I know has a wish list of things that the users have written at some point. So these have come from emails or tickets or whatever. Creating a new template is a great opportunity for making an improvement in the way you work with HP ALM. So any new ideas and improvements is something that we like to take into the template. The users have a bunch of good ideas that can be taken into the template to provide value. And any best practices from the field, take those in. So let me show you, for example, what we do with when we go do assessments. For example, what I have here is I have an Excel sheet which has pretty much all the data from my organization. I have all my projects here that I can filter by. I think I have this particular example I had about 150 projects. So what I have here is the most important data that I use when assessing the project. So here's Engo. That's one of the best practice projects that I know is out there. So what I usually do is what we usually do is we'll look at the best practices. We see what works and what doesn't. Okay, let's look at the defects, for example, to get started. Let's look at the defect field and let's look at category. Okay, that seems to be used fairly often, and I already know that's probably a field that we need to take in. So what I can do now is I can look at that's BG user 1 and category. So let's look at that field in other projects. So what I can do is I can take all my projects and check out for that category field. So let's see how aligned that is then in the actual databases. So what I can see is, and then I'll filter by defect just to make sure. You can see that the same field is in different modules with different names. Okay, so here we see the category field. We see that, okay, it's not really used that often in some projects, and that's because they've actually set it as a non-mandatory field. So that's probably the reason that these projects is allowed for some, customization, and the users have turned this field off. And that's an important note to make, that this should be made mandatory in the future projects. And then I can see, it's how aligned that is. In some projects it's in BG user 1, and some in BG user 7. So just some of the tools that we use to really look at what's out there, what are the fields that get used and which doesn't, and how do you build from that the template that you need. So taking in the best of the old, the best of the new, and then going from there. So that's about assessment. So about design, this is such a big topic and such a broad topic, and I chose this time to just focus on the fields part. I think that's the biggest pain and the biggest challenge that we see. We do have a lot of material on all these subjects. We've run a bunch of trainings on them. We have a complete guide on template design that you can get by emailing us at sales@assure.net. So if you'd like to get hands-on our complete guide, just email us at sales@assure.net. So what I'll show this time is kind of a subset from that guide, focusing on the fields. So template design, how to design the template. What do you do? So first of all, you gather all that assessment data. You gather your business requirements from roundtables, and you prioritize. You start going from in an agile fashion, doing it iteratively. Arranging roundtables with the stakeholders to make sure that you do demos, you run them through, you give them access to the template to make sure that it gets built right. You document what you do in the template, and you iterate and pilot. That's really some of the things that are key factors in template design. Now let's look at fields. because this is the topic. I know a lot of people. What are the right fields? How do we set up fields in the projects in our projects? What data should we put in there? So we like to think that there's two kinds of fields. There's operational fields. These are fields that the projects they need every day. So you need to have those statuses. You need to have assigned to. You need to have certain things that just help you run your bugs every day. You build your test sets and analyze your test coverage. And there are also measurement fields, some fields that management wants to have for measurement. So it's important when building the template to consider both kinds of fields and both kinds of stakeholders. So for these fields, you'll get your feedback from your test managers and testers, but for these fields, the feedback will actually come from higher up, so from your QA manager or QA director or even program manager. So make sure to take those people in the definement process. Some best practices on fields. Decide on the meaning of fields. So when you have a field like category for a defect, make sure that you decide on the meaning. What does that actually mean? And what we like to usually do is we document those fields. So we create an additional Excel that has those fields and has the meaning behind those fields as well. So make the label as as clear as possible, but also document the meaning of the fields, because that then acts as the user guide of your template for your users. Don't use string fields. Use verify value whenever possible. I don't see a lot of situations where that's not best. That's shouldn't be done. So I say 99% use verify value. Set required fields. Now I know if a field is required, it can bug your users. But I have a tip on this coming also later. On the subject of automatically filling in fields with workflow. So have required fields, because if it's not required, it probably won't get filled in. And just a performance tip: if you're doing analytics, if you're doing reporting and stuff like that, you should put your most used fields first. So if you look at look at your usage, how much of the data gets filled in, and put the most frequently used fields first, the ones that have the most content. You find that it can improve on the performance, especially when you fetch the data for reporting. So that's a couple of best practices. Now we got asked a lot about what fields do we create in our template. Here's one kind of best practice set that we gathered. Although I have to say that, having worked with clients from different lines of business, there's not one set that fits everybody, and even in a single customer you may need to serve a couple of different needs. For example, SAP projects is something that most often has their own needs and templates in any given customer. But this is a good set to start with. We can argue on some of these fields, but this is something we've gathered from a lot of our clients along the way. And maybe you're asking fields in a test set. I'll come back to that. I know they can be a bit bothersome because the way HP implements them, but there's a great tip for that as well. So you'll have this documentation later on. I'll give you this documentation later. Right. So that's just a couple of best practice fields. So also to think about fields and future proofing and so on. So fields equals analytics. So whatever reporting you need to do, whatever reporting you think you need to do next year, consider that when doing your template. So consider the data that you will need. If you need to analyze data per application, per feature, per team, per vendor, make sure you have that data in there. If you want to track your plan versus actual, make sure you have that data in there so that you can get those analytics when you get to the point when you want to really start analyzing the way that you do your QA business. You're going to be relying on many of those template fields. Workflow code, I'm not going to touch today. It's a very broad topic. I'm not going to go to that today. We have a great webinar on that that's archived on our website. It's called Ask the QC Guys session number 2 on customizations. And on the webinar page, you'll find a lot of others as well that will interest you as if you're a workflow oriented guy. Just there's a workflow is really great in automating things and making things work We have a lot of tips on workflow. There's template workflow in the templates that's a great way to deploy code into projects, but that's really something we cover in other webinars, so make sure to check that session out. All the Ask the QC Guys sessions are with guest speakers from the crowd as well. Now here's something I wanted to give as a tip. So I mentioned, have required fields, create these fields in the test set, and so on and so on. So how do you make that stuff so that it's easy? You capture as much data as possible, but without bothering the users. So here's an example that we see. We like to implement the best practice at customers, and what we see smart customers doing is actually automating the defects entry based on the data that you have in the template. So let's say a typical situation, you have a bunch of fields in the test case, so you have business process, feature, application. That implies the purpose of the test case. So okay, that you have a lot of good info there. Then you have your test set, where you take that subset of data from your test library here in test cases. And for a test set, you also always have these criteria where when it's running, what software version, what environment, what test team. And again, this information is something that gets filled by the person who creates a test set. So it's probably a test manager who knows all this stuff quite well. So having this as a mandatory field for a test, these as mandatory fields for test sets is something that really works in this example. So then you have all that information. You have the test case information and the test set information. So when a tester then pops up a new defect from that test set, what you can do is you can automatically populate the defects form with all this stuff that you got from the test set and test case. So all that stuff, application, feature, test phase, both from the test case, from the test set. We've even seen people do this from the release, where they take a QA manager from the release object in ALM, or development manager who they assign the bug to, for example. So this really means that your tester doesn't have to fill in all these fields. They get filled in with data that makes sense as entered by the test managers. And all the tester needs to focus on is filling in the fields that cannot be filled in automatically. So the tester's assessment of the situation. So having this kind of code in the template that takes all that smart data that you put in there, automatically populates it for your defect form, and makes sure that this data meanwhile that this data is reliable. That's a great customization that we see best practice organizations doing. And it really helps you with reporting as well. So this was kind of a fields together with workflow combination, an idea that you might want to implement. An example of how to capture data, but also without bothering the daily testers' work. Right. So flexibility, that's a hot potato. So how do you enforce control while still allowing for some customization? So how do you make a template and how design it as well as possible, but then allow for some leeway if the users ask for it. You might want to allow for some user-defined fields to be created, although make sure when doing that you do keep the reins on that. You'll want to maintain the control over this part of the administration as well. So maybe come up with the set of 10 most requested user-defined fields and populate those across the board. Set some template lists as editable. So this is something that HP doesn't really advertise, but there is a I don't know, hidden, but there's a site admin parameter in ALM where you can actually make certain template lists editable in the project. So that means that you can define a template field, you can define a template list, but you can make it editable in the project so they can enter their own list values and so on. So that's also in our guide. That you can get from if you send us a line at sales@assure.net. And finally, the better you design your template. So again, I highlight the fact that having those stakeholders involved in the design of the template makes sure that you don't really have to customize it after going into production. So the better you make your pre-work and do your design work, the less you need to customize it afterwards. So just some tips on that subject. Some template strategies, and we're a bit over time, but I just want to cover a couple of topics before we end. So some template strategies. So one template per line of business is something that's been a thumb rule. Some people use one template per domain, but I like to think of it more like a line of business. Super template and standardization actually go hand in hand. So the thoughts on that I have is you probably won't survive with a single template. You might, but from my experience, you probably end up having a handful. Now the key in that is to make sure that a part of that is still standardized. So certain key fields in your organization that you want to capture is kept as standardized as possible. Okay, some part of the organization may want a template that has, let's say, 10 fields that are not found in the other templates. You can just design it like that, but make sure that the rest of the 90% is standardized across the board. Template releases, and so then we come to actually pushing out customization. So what triggers a new feature, a new release of a template, for example? When do you actually push that out? Make sure that you have that considered. We like to do template releases where we capture a bunch of changes at any given time, and we test them and we make sure that it works, and then we push it out along with the release note to the users. And make sure that there is a change management process in the way that you do things, that you just don't push things out all the time. Keep users informed. About template strategies and projects and templates, there's a great webinar that we have. It's about an hour-long webinar with Olivia from HP IT. Check that out. You can see it in our webinar archive. So putting all the eggs in one basket or in several baskets, you'll find a great bunch of content on that topic specifically in this archived webinar. Right. So the final part in pushing out templates, deployment and training. So some of these are, in any software projects, probably run into these, but I wanted to highlight a couple of things from here. So first of all, deploy templates at non-peak times. There's a slight performance impact, and if you're doing a larger change, then you'll want to do that at non-office hours. So do it on a weekend, for example, to deploy that template. Involve your stakeholders in smoke testing after the template has been applied. So make sure that they test that their data works and everything is as supposed to be. Make sure you're ready for rollbacks if you're going to do a major change. Communication is really key, so make sure the users know if there's going to be a change and what the change is actually going to be. I'm going to come back to the cultural issues in my final slide. And training. This is something we've seen as a part of any change process in ALM that really helps get user acceptance, is the fact that once you roll out a new version of a template, you change the way that people work, have a short webcast or have short videos. I like to do them with Camtasia. I just record a couple of things like, here's the new way you record, enter defects, here's the new way that the requirements module works, and push that out to the users. That really helps in adoption, and it really helps you share that knowledge out so that the users know what to do after the change. Now, how do you apply templates over existing projects? A lot of you have probably tried it for starting a new project from scratch. So in our next webinar, we'll talk about ALM standardization and how to convert projects so that they're aligned with templates. That's going to be in the next webinar, next session after this. And in the final session, you'll also hear about a customer who has standardized their projects and is using templates successfully. Right, I think this is my final slide, and then we're going to go to the QA. So the 3 top challenges in implementing templates: the cultural or political resistance. So you'll probably run into these. So make sure you have sponsorship. Make sure you have management sponsorship. You have the buy-in from management. You have the reasons why you're building the template. That really helps avoid, get you across that political resistance. Communicate the value of what you're doing. So you're actually improving the way you work. You're making it easier for the testers. Make sure that people know what you're going to be doing, and involve them in those stakeholder meetings. Use an expert to run that project, someone who's been there before and knows how to do this thing, and also do that training so that the users, you get the users buy-in that I already mentioned. Now, how do you make it a successful engagement? Run the template creation as a project. Make sure you have the right people and their commitment and time, and use available technology such as, you know, we've got technology that we use. For example, the stuff that I showed, the Excel analysis tool that we use. That's something we use in template creation projects. Try to figure a way to use technology in running those engagements, and build the right template. That's key. So make sure that the template you build and design is based on all that experience from dealing with your stakeholders. All right, so, and a reminder, we have got 2 sessions coming up, the complete standardization and the road to unified testing processes. Both are in April, and go to assure.net/webinars if you haven't already signed up. All right, so that's quite a tight 35 minutes on templates and some of the best practices within. We do, here at Assure, we do have the technology know-how and experience in successfully implementing HP ALM templates, as well as standardizing projects. So if this is something that you're considering, how to implement templates, how to start with that, and give us a contact at sales@assure.net, or give us a ring at either of these numbers, and we're happy to discuss how we could help you guys out in your challenges. All right, so that's really much what I had today. So let's have some Q&A. So there's 2 ways of asking questions. I can see we have a bunch of them already, so let me address those. And you can also write new questions into the Q&A. There's a question about how did you get the spreadsheet? Okay, this is something that we use internally, and it's something that we use in our engagements, and you can contact us at sales@assure.net, and we can talk about how we could engage with you. Any other questions? So there's a question about template fields. Are template fields different from project fields? Yes, they are. So with Quality Center 10 Premier and with the templates functionality, HP introduced a concept of template fields. So that means that there's another 99 fields that can be used in projects as well. So you have 99 plus 99 these days. But make sure that once you're using templates, you should stick to template fields. So having a mixture of template and project UDF, or user-defined fields, that might become a huge mess going forward. So stick to either one. Any other questions? Anything you'd like to ask? I think we have some coming in. If you'd like to raise your hand, I can also take a live question. So if you'd like to press on the raise hand icon, I'd be happy to address your question live as well. Right, so let's see. How many, okay, there's a question about how many projects do you recommend per template? Well, that depends on the number of fields and the number of projects. I think we have some examples in our previous webinars. I'll have to look those up. We had some benchmarks. I've seen customers having, I think, about 50 projects for a template, and still it worked quite well. But it's something that you'll have to, as I'll probably mention in another webinar, I'll have to try out what's the right ratio. Anything else? Anything else you'd like to ask? All right, I'm going to give it just a minute for you to ask your questions. We have, okay, there is one. Let's check it out. We have an enterprise template with project-specific UDFs. Is there a way to grant users access to update their project fields? Great question. Thanks for that, Bill. So let me address that. So you have a template with project-specific UDFs, and you want to grant your users access to update their project fields. Yes, it is possible for you to allow them to customize project fields. Quality Center allows you to allow that assign that privilege for these users. You can use a user group to manage that, but I would try to avoid doing that as much as possible, because once you think there's a lot of people here who didn't used to have templates but have them now, and remember from the old days when people were given admin access and they really took things from there and customized it to their liking. So I recommend you don't give them access to update their project fields and to create new ones. I would reserve that right to the members of the site admin team, and to even a specific group that handles all those requests. Now, what you can do is you can allow them the opportunity to modify their project lists. So you can, as I said earlier, there's a way of making those template lists editable. So you could actually think about moving those fields to the template and then making those lists editable in those projects. So hopefully that build answered your question. It is possible to give users the right to update their project fields, but while doing that, you're also introducing a lot of hazard into the equation as well, when they can really customize things the way that they want. All right, any other questions? Anything else? That's a good question there. Right. Bill says he likes the specific project list suggestion. Okay, great. Anything else? Anything else from the line? If you want to ask a live question, I'd be happy to address that as well. Okay. It doesn't look like there's any further questions, so I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up the session. Thanks very much for attending. Please remember to fill in the feedback form as you exit, and give me a contact if you have anything to ask. I'll be happy to answer your questions. And if you're going to the Quest conference next week in Baltimore, I'll see you there. And if you're going to HP Discover Las Vegas this year, I'll be seeing some of you guys there as well. So thanks for your time and attention, and I'll provide the materials and the video to you shortly after this session. Thanks for your time, and bye-bye.